Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So I'd like to welcome everybody this evening. I'm glad everyone was able to come. And I know for some of us, it's not evening right now, it's middle of the morning. And um, so I've been continuing on with some of these journeys and travels. And it's been interesting because one of the themes that from these different places I've been visiting, these different groups and these different centers I've been giving talks to, one of the real themes I've been noticing is this theme of Kalyana-Mitta and of having, our good friends, our Dhamma friends, and just seeing places I'm going where these, there's these groups of people supporting each other and encouraging each other and working together to really do good things, and having these friends has been really nice. It's been a really nice thing to see. And this is one of the things that the Buddha praised very highly, having good friends, having Dhamma friends. There's one time the Buddha was with his attendant, his what we call an upatak, who was the Venerable Ananda. And the Venerable Ananda said to the Buddha, I think having good friends, having our Kalyana-Mitta is half of the holy life. And the Buddha said, no, 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 don't say that. Don't say that. It's not half of the holy life. It's all of the holy life, or the whole of the holy life. And which is, from the Buddha, this is really high praise. The Buddha wasn't someone who just like, it was giving out false praises, or, or speaking in exaggerations or hyperbole. Like, so the Buddha, like, he really, really felt this was important to have good friends who are going to help encourage us on the path, who are going to encourage us to do good things, who can point out to us also when we have shortcomings, when we have points we're not doing so well on. But when talking about Kalyana-Mitta, about our good friends, one of the stories which always comes up and always comes to mind is this one story from the suttas. It's about the quarrel at Kosambi. So Kosambi, at least the way I read the suttas, it sounds like it was a pretty big monastery, and it had a lot of monks living at it. And there was two main teachers in the monastery. One was a Dhamma teacher, and the other one was the Vinaya teacher. So Vinaya is like the monk's rules or the monk's discipline. So one was expert in the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. The other one was expert in the monk's rules and the monk's lifestyle. And one of them, I forget which one it was, one of them used the toilet. And then afterwards, in Asia at that time, as we still do in a lot of Southeast Asia, you use a water dipper. You use water for the toilet. And there was a dipper, and whichever one of these teachers used the washroom, afterwards he had left some water in the dipper. And then the other teacher went in afterwards and was like, "Oh, he left water in the dipper. That's actually against the rules. That's an offense for the monks." But a very, very, very minor rule too. So it's actually a lower offense than if pulling a leaf off of a tree. So pulling a leaf off a tree is worse than this. So like the most like minor offense we can get as a monk. And he went and pointed it out to the other teacher. The other teacher got offended by it and didn't see it as an offense. And it started this rift. It started this schism in the monastery. And so everyone in the monastery started to take sides. Some sided with the Dhamma teacher, some sided with the Vinaya teacher, until eventually the entire monastery was split into like two angry factions. As it says in the suttas, they were stabbing each other with verbal daggers. So they were saying some pretty nasty things to each other, you know, uh and so it was this really hot, contentious issue. Remember, over water in a dipper. And then finally the Buddha comes. You know, he's heard about this and he comes to try to settle this matter so everything can go back to normal and everyone can get back to doing their practice. And when the Buddha arrives and tries to fix the situation, the monks in the monastery, they basically just tell him to take off. They say, you know, no, you're enlightened already, you know, it's fine, you know, we'll deal with this matter. You got to remember that this is the Buddha, this is the founder of Buddhism, you know, this is the teacher to all of them. You know, they all went forth and became monks out of faith in the Buddha, but they just told him to take off, you know, and again, over water in a dipper. And I think, you know, we always use this. And then afterwards, the Buddha went to the Gosinga Park where there was actually three monks really living in harmony there. And, you know, and he talks about it. That becomes a really big teaching on how to live in harmony. And so we, you know, we hold up the quarrel at Kosambi as, you know, about disharmony and that can happen. But one of the things I, you know, really see in in that story, and at least I get from it, sometimes I look at these a little different than most people, but I really, to me, it really screams just how much um, we can get really attached and hold on to really little minor things. So, you know, even though, you know, we say the issue was about water in a dipper, at the end of the day, it wasn't about water in a dipper. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with this sense of self, the ego, the conceit, you know, that this attachment we have. I don't want to be wrong. You know, I want to be right. So at the end of the day, you know, it wasn't about the issue. It was about trying to be right, you know, and this sense of self. And it really shows you where how much um attachment these attachments to these little things can really hurt us and really cause suffering, and how we create a sense of self around this. You know, it can be very hard to let go of these things, to just say, yeah, I was wrong, okay, it was the offense, or to just be like, okay, he left water in a dipper. It's no big deal. I'll just let it go. But we don't. We hold on to these things. So there's this phrase in Pali, and it's, you know, I've used it before. It's the really fun one to say, ahankara mamankara. So this is this I making and mind making. So, you know, we really create this sense of self around little issues like this, around little things like this, and you know, one of the places I always think you can see it the strongest is when, you know, it comes to stuff like sports teams. You know, even though this people don't who are sports fans don't play on the teams, don't know anyone on the teams, you know, they can create so much identity around it, being a fan of a team. So if you know, criticize someone's hockey team or football team or soccer team, you know, it can be a big problem. It can be fighting words, you know, and again, over something that they're personally not connected to, but they've created this sense of self around it. Or I remember when I was in high school, you'd see this with some people with music. Some people would get really attached to their music, and if someone criticized the music they were listening to, they'd get really offended. And so this you know, this really, you know, showing how these attachments, this creating this self, you know, really can create suffering for us. So even now, I've just come back to a Bodhisattva monastery, and I've spent a total of about 2 years here before, over several different visits. So the first time I came here was, you know, 10 years ago. And I've always had very pleasant visits, you know, a really great time. I'm friends with all the monks here. You know, I've known all the lay people. It's bloody hot right now, though. It's that's not very pleasant, but the thermometer yesterday said it was 46, but I think the thermometer was in the sun though. But I've always had a great time here. And but every time I come back, because it's, you know, when I came, the monastery was very new, was just getting started, and there wasn't much here. But over time, you know, it's been growing and changing, and they're building more things. So every time I come back, you know, you see the changes. You see, you know, some of the old lay people aren't coming anymore. You've got some new ones. There's always new buildings and stuff. And, you know, it's very easy for us to get attached to the way things used to be. oh, when I was first here, it was so different and it was such a nice experience. Oh, I wish things were like that. But they're not. And that getting attached to that craving for it to be different than it is, can create suffering. And also, we never really remember things the way they actually were. We sometimes romanticize things in our mind, or sometimes, we remember a certain emotion about the things. So, when I first came here, it was very, very basic living conditions. I lived in a little hut in a cave, and it was the only reason I was in there because I was the only monk small enough to fit in it because I'm quite short. So but there was no heaters in the monastery and it was winter. So, it was very, very cold. And so when you remember, oh, how great it was, sometimes you maybe forget that part that, oh, actually it was the coldest I've ever been in my life. Or, and we can remember certain aspects, or sometimes we remember things worse than they are. And then just, we create this craving over this. I want it to be the way it was. I want things not to have changed. And this is, back to the Four Noble Truths. And, the real foundation of the teachings of the Buddha, the second noble truth is the cause of suffering is craving. And so craving, in Buddhism, we have three different types of craving. Um, the word is tanha. So we have kama tanha, which is craving for sense pleasures. So this is wanting, pleasant sense experiences, sights, smells, tastes, sounds, tactile sensations, and mind objects. And then we have bhava tanha, which is the craving to be, for us to be a certain way, for things to be a certain way. And then we have vibhava tanha, which is craving for things not to be, for us not to be a certain way, for other things not to be a certain way. So whenever we have this craving coming up in the mind, it's going to be creating suffering, dukkha or discontent, stress. So when this happens, so we can look at this and look at our experience like this and just see that, okay, I'm wanting things to be different than they are. I'm wanting things to be how they used to be in the past, or how this memory I have, which may not be quite accurate, of how things were in the past. It creates some suffering over it, some discontent. And and so it's important for us to look at that, because when the Buddha taught, the Four Noble Truths, when he taught about suffering, like the truth of suffering, that there is dukkha, he said, dukkha needs to be known. So we have to, so we can look at this, we can understand it, we can understand our own suffering. So it was one time the Buddha was asked, like, what do you teach? And he really simplified in this. He said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And at first you're like, wow, that sounds kind of dark. Like I teach suffering, right? But it's important he's teaching us to know suffering, to know what is suffering, what isn't suffering, and what's the cause of suffering. And then of course how to end suffering. So when we do have these, unpleasant experiences, we can look at it and just be aware, okay, this is suffering, this is dukkha, this experience of wanting things to be different than they are. This is suffering. And and then look at, okay, what's causing it? Well, it's this craving. I don't want things to be like this. So when Lumpur Sumedho, he likes to tell this story of when he first went to go stay at England in England. He said he actually didn't want to leave Thailand. He was very happy living in Thailand, but Lumpur Cha had sent him to England to start the monasteries and the sangha in the West. And so he went because he had all this faith in Lumpur Cha. And one of the things he noticed when he got there is that in England, people complained a lot about the weather. I guess, England can be pretty rainy and kind of dark, I guess maybe like Vancouver weather. Um, and he made this real determination that he wasn't going to ever complain about the weather. Like that was just one thing. He's not going to join that. He's not going to complain about the weather. And he said actually over time he learned to really enjoy the weather there. And he actually really liked the English weather. So you see, it's not necessarily just the situation we're in, which is creating the suffering. It's the craving we have in the situation. And then in the third noble truth, um, the end of suffering. So it's the nirodha or the cessation of suffering. And I remember once reading, it was a lay teacher in America, and he was saying that the third noble truth was hope. So he said that when you know that there is a cessation of suffering, an end of suffering, that this truth is actually pointing to hope, hope for what the outcome is. But that's actually incorrect because it doesn't just say there is a cessation of suffering. It actually gives instructions of how to end suffering. So it's actually an instructional part as well too, because it says, the craving has to be abandoned. We have to let go of that craving and give up that craving. And then the fourth noble truth gives us the path of practice for how to do that. So 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 yeah, this is just something I've been looking at and reflecting on since I've been here is some of these things around our attachments, around wanting things to go a certain way, wanting things not to go a certain way, and especially in kind of the situation I've been in the last few weeks where I have no control of what's going on. It's people sometimes give me a schedule, you're going to be doing this and this. Other times it's I just get in the car and see see where we go, right? So there has to be a bit of that. You can't get too attached of, I want things to be like this. I want to do this. I want to do that. You've got to just be able to let go, and adapt and go with the flow. So, it's the same with us in our lives. We can get really focused on, I want this result, I want that result, or I want things to go a certain way. But we have to really watch ourselves that we're getting too attached to this because the more attached we are to it, the more suffering we're going to have if it doesn't go the way we want it to go. And as we've all experienced in life, life throws us curveballs. Sometimes you're really excited about something going a certain way, and then boom, it all changes, and it all falls apart. So we have to be a little flexible with ourselves, that ability to adapt. It's like that story, that teaching I really love from Ajahn Amaro was when he was a junior monk living in Chithurst Monastery, and someone came to see Lumpur Sumedho. Lumpur Sumedho was the abbot at the time, and so Ajahn Amaro goes to get him and goes up to his room and just kind of barges in. And Lumpur Sumedho's sitting there meditating. And Ajahn Amro's like, oh no, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. And Lumpur Sumedho said, no, no, that's okay. Adaptability is the key. So, so for us, we have to work on that, being able to adapt to how things are going to go in our lives, adapt to change, being able to see these attachments. And I think one of the important things to be able to adapt to the change is to really notice when we are getting really attached. Notice when we are, okay, this has got to go like this has got to go like that. And being able to, just prepare yourself, remind yourself that's not what, it's might not happen like that. Things are uncertain. Like Lumpur Cha always taught, it's my nay, it's not certain, it's not for sure. So even here right now, we're getting ready for a very, very big event. I think now it's up to 70 monks are going to be coming. Most of them are coming from Thailand, and it's going to be, a huge event. We're still trying to figure out where we're going to put everybody. And, it's one of those things with so many monks coming, so many lay people are going to be coming. We also have to have a bit of that adaptability here too, and just knowing, okay, whatever plan we make, it might not turn out like that. So, I'd like to offer this as a short reflection for everyone this evening.